Nations, what is a constitution? And we're going to have a look at what a constitution actually is in the eyes of the law, because I find sometimes people don't have a clear notion of what a constitution is. Now, just to preface what we're looking at here, DeVattel's The Law of Nations is divided into, treatise is divided into 3 sections. There's the preliminary section, and then there's Book 1 and Book 2. And what we'll be looking at today comes from Book 1. Now, you'll notice that each part is titled with a section number and heading. That's exactly as they appear in the Law of Nations. You'll notice that as we go through, we skip certain numbers, certain sections, because what I'm bringing to you is a summary and an analysis. Now, obviously in the summary, you have to exclude some parts, otherwise you might just as well go and read the whole book. So I'm bringing forth here the parts that I think are relevant to what a constitution is, and that highlight certain aspects of a constitution that I think some people may not be aware of. Now, as we go through, we'll also touch on issues of sovereignty, issues of what is a man and a person, what is a nation, what actually is it, and other things which come up in the discussion of what a constitution is. And then after we've looked at it as it appears in the Law of Nations, we will then summarise and drill down to the core meaning of what a constitution is. Okay, and we'll go through that in a number of steps, so that hopefully as I go through each step of reducing what's being said to a core, you can see that I'm not making any fundamental changes to the meaning of what's being said. I'm just really, hopefully, my intention is to give a crystal clear definition of what a constitution really is. So as we look at this, you'll see that there'll be sections highlighted in red. That is exactly as these sections appear in DeVattel's The Law of Nations. And then you'll see some italicised pieces highlighted in blue. They're insertions I have made in order to hopefully make it clearer to you what DeVattel is referring to when he uses some of the terms. So we'll just start reading through it. I'll stop occasionally to explain different things, and we'll start now. So what you see on the screen there, we're starting at section 26. We have seen already that every political society must necessarily establish a public authority, that is, the sovereign, to regulate their common affairs, to prescribe to each individual the conduct he ought to observe with a view to the public welfare, and to possess the means of procuring obedience. The fundamental regulation that determines the manner in which the public authority, that is the sovereignty, is to be executed is what forms the constitution of the state. So what he's saying there is the fundamental law of a state, of a nation, is its constitution. The laws that concern the body, that is the nation, people, corporation itself, the form of government, the manner in which the public authority, that is sovereignty, is to be exerted, together form the constitution of the state and are the fundamental laws. Now, I really highlight that because you'll see the term fundamental laws come up as we go through other sections of this treatise. And what DeVattel means by fundamental laws is the Constitution. Okay, so when he uses the term fundamental laws, he means the Constitution of the state. Sovereignty is that public authority which commands in civil society and orders and directs what each citizen is to perform. This authority, that is, sovereignty, originally and essentially belonged to the body of the society, that is, the people, to which each member of the body corporate submitted and ceded his natural right of conducting himself in everything as he pleased, that is, his absolute sovereignty. So what he's saying quite clearly there is that men had absolute sovereignty, but in forming a society, they gave that absolute sovereignty up to the sovereign that they have nominated in the Constitution. Moving on, the prince, that is the sovereign, derives his authority from the nation, that is the people. He possesses just so much of it as they have thought proper to entrust him with. If the nation has plainly and simply invested him with the sovereignty without limitation or division, he is supposed to be invested with all prerogatives, that is, absolute power. So what he's clearly saying there is, if when you form a constitution or a nation or a society and you nominate a sovereign and you don't put any restrictions on his power is absolute. If the prince, that is the sovereign, is invested with a full, absolute and unlimited sovereignty, he is above the laws, which derive from him all their force, and he may dispense with his own observance of them. What they're saying is, an absolute sovereign is above the law. And a little bit of research on your part would show to you that in the United Kingdom, the Queen, or the sovereign, is above the law. And I have displayed that elsewhere in other videos I've done. But you can go and find that for yourself. It's not that hard to find. Don't be distracted either. You might find some people who give an impression that somehow the Queen would be subject to the laws, but they're not credible sources. If you go to credible legal sources, the Queen is above the law, plain and simple. She can kill people and she can't be charged with any crime because she's above the law. If the authority, that is the sovereignty of the prince, that is the sovereign, is limited and regulated by the fundamental laws, that is the Constitution, the prince, that is the sovereign, on exceeding the bounds prescribed him, breaks the contract, that is the Constitution, which bound the people to him. The people become free by the act of the sovereign breaking the contract. Now, there's I've substituted a lot of terms there, so I might just go back and read that again for you, putting in my terms in place of the terms that DeVattel has put in there, because I think it's easier to comprehend with the terms I've got. So I'll try and read it again a little more smoothly. If the sovereignty of the sovereign is limited and regulated by the Constitution, the sovereign, on exceeding the bounds prescribed him in the Constitution, breaks the contract which bound the people to him, the people thus becoming free by the act of the sovereign breaking the contract. Hopefully that's a little clearer, and we'll go through that again as we summarise this down further. I just want you to note, you'll note there I've bolded the contract. Why? Because I want to draw to your attention that a constitution fundamentally is a contract. It's a contract between the people themselves. So it's a contract you've made with everyone else. And in that contract you nominate a sovereign to govern you and everyone else. Moving on. A nation becomes incorporated, that is, forms a corporation, into a society to labour for the common welfare, that is, to have a common purpose, as it shall think proper, and to live according to its own laws. With this view it establishes a public authority, that is, a sovereign. What I really want to point out there is that a nation is a corporation, a body corporate. Corporation, body corporate, same thing. I've done a video on body corporates and I'll reference that as we get down in the summary. If you want to know more about that, why every nation on the planet is a corporation, go and watch that video and I'll reference it later as we go through, but I won't get bogged down on that just now. Just wanted to make the point that it says a nation becomes incorporated. Well, the term incorporated means to form a corporation. So a nation forms a corporation. We'll dig into that a little more in the next screen. The affection a man feels for the state of which he is a member ought flow from the engagements, that is, contracts, he has entered into with society. He has promised, that is, contracted, to procure its safety and advantage as far as it is in his power. That is, he agrees to give everything he has, even unto his life. If you give something that's as far as is in your power, that means you give everything and withhold nothing. Okay? And again, I wanted to point out the two keys I wanted to point out here. When they say engagements, that means contracts. When they say promised, that means contracted. If you promise something, you've contracted to do it. Ultimately that's what a promise is. It's a contract. It's when you promise to do something, you contract to do it. You bind yourself to it. Okay. The executive power, that is the sovereignty, naturally belongs to the sovereign. He is supposed to be invested with it in its fullest extent, that is, absolutely, when the fundamental laws, that is the Constitution, does not restrict it. Okay, so that's the end of what I wanted to draw from the Law of Nations. Now we'll look at those self-same sections. I might have dropped one or two out because I've made the point I wanted to make with those, but we're going to go through most of those again, except now what I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute the terms I was using for the terms DeVattel was using, because I think it brings it tightens it up and makes it clearer what's being said, instead of mixing terms all the time as DeVattel does. Now I just want to say here too, I've now reduced in font size and put in black what the term DeVattel used. And what I have done is I've left italicized, but I've now put it in red, and I've left it in brackets, but I've now put it in red, the term that I was transposing for DeVattel's terminology. Okay? So be aware of that as we go through. So all I've done is, where DeVattel's used a term that I think is a little bit vague, I've left it in there, but it's now, you'll see it in black, and I won't read it out. But you'll see it there in black, and I've reduced it in font size. And I'm now going to, when I read it, I will read the term that I'm substituting for DeVattel's term, which now appears in red, but it still appears italicized and is still enclosed in brackets. Okay, so that you can analyse and examine that for yourself. So let's just read that. The fundamental regulation that determines the manner in which the sovereignty is to be executed is what forms the constitution of the state. The laws that concern the nation itself, the form of government, the manner in which the sovereignty is to be exerted, together form the constitution of the state and are the fundamental laws. Sovereignty is that public authority which commands in civil society and orders and directs what each citizen is to perform. This sovereignty originally and essentially belonged to the people, to which each member of the body corporate submitted and ceded his absolute sovereignty. The sovereign derives his authority from the people. He possesses just so much of it as they have thought proper to entrust him with. If the nation has plainly and simply